Good morning, everyone. This is Ronnie Kaplan from Computer Training Solutions.
And this is Gary Feldman from US Computer Connection.
Hello. We are going to do today Excel as a database. And you should be seeing on your screen a sample of a database. And this is one that has about 1,000 records to it. And it has, I believe, 11 columns or categories to it. So on the top row, we have the names of the categories, and underneath each row is a record. In this case, companies, salespeople, orders, dates, quantities, etc. It's important that it be set up correctly in order for Excel to work with the database, which means that it has to be contiguous rows and contiguous columns. If you leave a blank row under the headings, for instance, or a blank column before you have your extended price, the program will not be able to do the database correctly, because for many of the database functions, it automatically self-selects all the contiguous data and assumes that that's your database. So do not leave entirely blank columns or rows. And your headings also need to be, each heading needs to be in one cell. Do not use more than one cell. In other words, put extended in K1 and price in K2. It will not see the one that is above. Okay, so now that we have a look at the database, I'm just going to kind of scroll down and show you this is one with about 1,000 records. You can have one with 50,000 records, and some people do. And it's important that you put the information in correctly. And one of the things you can do, whether you have set it up to actually have the database functions or not, is you can always sort. If you click into a column, anywhere in a column, as long as it's contiguous, you have on your Home tab an A to Z sort, and you also have it on the Data tab. So I've just sorted it all by company. If I wanted to sort it all by quantity, I can say whether I want to do the highest first would be Z to A. And so I've sorted it by that. If you would like to sort by more than one column, you can go into the Sort and Filter, and you can go to Custom Sort. Again, you can do this on the Data tab as well. So here, let's say I decide the first choice I want to do is by salesperson, and I want that to be A to Z. Whoops, A to Z. And then I can say add a level. And then after salesperson, maybe I want to sort by product name, and I want that to be also A to Z. And, oh, I hit ship date, no wonder. I wanted product name, and I wanted A to Z. Okay, then I can add another level, and maybe I want to sort by quantity. So I can do this for as many fields as I like. And then once I say okay, it's done that. So I have all of one salesperson, and within that salesperson, I have the products alphabetically listed. And within the same product, I have the quantity from smallest to largest. So that's, you know, anytime you want to. And if I go to the Data tab, just to show you, here's your A to Z, Z to A sort, and here's your more complete sort where you can sort by multiple levels. Okay. Also, one of the big features on a database, any database, is to be able to filter things. So if I am anywhere in my contiguous data and I click on the Filter tab, on the Data tab on the Sort and Filter, it puts little drop-down arrows next to each of my field names. And on those drop-down arrows, I can then modify things. So if I click in the product name, at first it has all the products selected, and there are plenty of them. So if I say, no, I don't want to select them all, I just want to see the ones that are chai. And then when I say, okay, here are just the products that say chai, and maybe I realize, oh, I have another product that's called tea, which is similar. So I can go down and I can also select mint tea. And so now I'm seeing the chai and the tea. Okay. If I'm only interested in the ones that are over a certain price, I can click on the price drop down and then say, I can pick a specific price, or I can say greater than, and maybe I say $15, 15. And now I'm only looking at the ones that are over 15. If I only want to see the records where the quantity ordered was more than 25, I can do greater than on that and say 25. So here are all of the chai or tea products ordered that are over $15 in price, unit price, and more than 25 quantity ordered. So, and notice that each field that I have filtered on has a little funnel or filter to let me know that those are the fields that I filtered on. Sometimes it might be hard to tell when you have so many different fields like we do here. I can, of course, unfilter each one individually by saying clear the quantity filter, for instance, or I can go up top and just say clear, and that would clear all the filters. So now I have all 1,000 records back again. So I've done filtering by some numeric categories, and I've done filtering by some product categories. I can also filter by date. These are very old dates here, but they are dates. And if I say, okay, I want the ones that were ordered, and notice when I can pick a specific month or a specific year, these are all the same year, but if I go into date filters, notice all of these different choices, today, yesterday, after, last month, this quarter, next quarter, this year, year to date. So if you're dealing with current dated items, this is extremely helpful. If I say dates between, so I'm going to say after 5/1/09, because these are all 09 dates on this database, and before 12/1/09. Whoops. Okay, whoops. To be able to type here. All right, so now it's only those particular months and it's lost some of them. So you can do lots of different date filters, and I'm just going to clear that now. So I have no filters right now. Notice when I scroll down, I lose my headings, which is not very convenient, but we could, of course, we could solve that issue by selecting here and telling it in the view that we want to freeze the pane at this point. And then I would be able to scroll down and still keep my headings on top. Okay. Now, in addition to being able to sort and filter with just using a data range, which you could always do in Excel from way back in the first version, I don't know how many years ago now, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But we can also now, starting with the 2007 version, I'm going to turn off the filter here, because we can also turn this into a table. And again, it requires you to be clicked somewhere into the contiguous data and go to the Insert tab. And notice on the left side, under the tables grouping, is just plain table. We're not talking pivot table here, just plain table. And when I click on that, it's going to automatically select one of the times that it selects the contiguous range. And your table has to have headers, of course, to make sense. And we say, okay, and we are now in a table. Why I have that yellow, oh, I see, the yellow is preventing it from showing. So let's clear this. I just chose to make a yellow background earlier. And if I say no fill, now this is what the table would look like. So it's, and it has automatically, by the way, docked those headings at the top. It didn't matter whether I had done that manually before with the freeze panes, that you wouldn't have had to do that. It would automatically do that in a table. And when you're in a table, you've automatically receive these, it's additional tab here that says Design Table Tools. So this tab will show up when you're in a table. If I click away from the table, that tab goes away. As soon as I click back anywhere in the table, I get that tab back again. And one of the first things that is very obvious is all these different colorful styles for the table. So the one you're looking at right now is the default style. But if I click on this drop down, see how many different styles, and you have this automatic view what you're looking at. And I can pick any of these styles. Some of them are too dark and don't look very attractive. Some of them are very attractive. You'll notice most of them have a banded row, so it makes it easier to read across, but not every single one. You might not want that for some reason. So this is kind of the default one. I'll just leave it on that. But also in this design tab, in addition to having automatically put the drop down so that I can select the salesperson that I want or persons that I want to see, okay, and that I can also select the products that I want. Again, I'll just pick a few of them. Yeah, so that's the same as it was before. But you also have other choices here. For instance, usually the first column would be, the first field would be key, like an employee ID name or number, or an invoice number. So if I choose to make that first column stand out in some way, I can check first column, and depending upon what style, it will somehow highlight that first column. It might change the shading or the bolding and so forth. And the same thing in last column, if I like. A lot of times the last column is crucial, so you can do that. Another very easy thing to add when you're in the table is to say, give me a total row, and it automatically puts a total on the bottom, whether I am in a filtered position here or not. So I can go and clear the filter from that, and clear the filter from the product name. And no matter where I am, it will take me down to a total. I will have a total on the bottom here. And what it does automatically is it sums the last column as long as that column has values. But if I want to see what the average quantity order is, I can click in that one and notice it has automatically given me those mathematical capabilities here to do an average on the unit price or the quantity. Obviously, the items that aren't values I can't average, but I might want to say I want to count. So I could do that. So it tells me I have $9.99 in terms of that. And anytime I don't want the total, I can just uncheck it. So I can check or uncheck any of those things. Okay. So we can modify to many of these formats. It's even possible to customize and create your own format, although they certainly give you enough choices. Another very nice feature in here, especially if you have very large databases, is they have a remove duplicates choice. And if you go to remove duplicates, the default is for every single field to be duplicated. But if you're not so concerned with that, and you only want to take the ones that have the same salesperson, the same order date, and the same company name, let's say, and say, okay, it will then, okay, it found 370 duplicate values and removed them. So those are now removed from the list. So you would want to make sure that that's what you want to do before you do that. So now I no longer have 999. Here I have that 629. Okay. So those are some of the things you can do here. And you can also convert it back into a normal range. And there are certain functions that with database that you would not be able to do properly in a table, so that you might want to convert it back to a range at some point. I'll illustrate one of those functions in a few minutes. If you are converting it back to a range and you have a banded row effect, you want to turn that banded row off first. Otherwise, when it's in a regular data, just a data range, and you start sorting or adding things, the banded won't make sense, because it will remain on that row that you have it on. So here's the way to do that. You go to the styles and you pick the one all the way on the top left, and that takes all of the color, the banding, and all of that off. And then you can say convert to a range, which is right in your Table Tools Design tab towards the left. And do you want to convert it to a normal range? Yes. And now you just have a data range. So this is not something that you have a table on at this point. Okay, I'm going to open up another table for now that's a little bit less complicated, a little smaller, so it's, I think, easier for people to get their heads around what I'm going to be doing. Make it a little bigger here. So this is an employee listing. So you have names and employee numbers, departments, date of hire, gross pay, etc. So it's a lot less fields and a lot less records. So there's about 95 records here. Okay, so if we wanted to sort this, again, if I'm not turning it into a table first, I can simply sort it by whatever. And here right on my home tab, all the way at the right, I could do A to Z. And by the way, if you were doing a lot of this, I would certainly put sorting and filtering on my quick access toolbar. Very easy to do. If I do this and I say add to the quick access toolbar, I've always got that at my fingertips. I don't have to worry about what tab I'm in. Okay, so I could sort it by that, and of course I could sort it by multiple things. Now, what if I wanted to know a gross pay total for each state? So I have Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. They're all alphabetical now. So the first thing I would have to do, I mean, I could do this manually by creating a blank line in between each and adding up the gross pay for each one. But this can be done in a couple of clicks if you know what you're doing. So the first thing you want to do is sort it, like I did, by the field that you would like to subtotal. So that would be, in this case, location or state. So I've sorted it by state. Now, if I go into the Data tab, all the way on the right in this outline grouping, you'll see subtotal, and that's what we're doing. We're creating subtotals. So if I click on that subtotals, I'm just going to move this out so you can see it. At each change in, and it just has num because I just called the first column number. At each change in location, because that's what I sorted it by, give me a subtotal for gross pay. But will by default choose the last column because that's generally our key column that we want to know about. But you can change it to anything, or you can do more than one column. And instead of sum, if you wanted to see average or product or variance, you could. Sum is by far the most common, so I'm going to leave that there. We don't have to replace any previous totals here, but that's fine if it does. And we want a summary below the data, which means give me a grand total. And I don't have a very large database here, but for instance, in the last one we were looking at, I could have said, give me a page break between groups because I wanted each salesperson to start on a new page for printing purposes or for other purposes. But here I don't need to do that because it's a small group. So I'm going to say OK, and watch what has happened. Under Connecticut, it gave me Connecticut total, and there's the subtotal, and then it gives me a subtotal for Maine, a subtotal for New Hampshire, and after the Vermont subtotal, that's a grand total. Okay, pretty nifty. And on the left side, the reason it was in this outline group is because it creates an outline. And the outline means how many levels of data do you have? And we have 3 levels here, so it gives us 1, 2, 3. Right now we're looking at all the data, so that's 3. If I want to see level 2, look at what I have here, just the subtotals and the grand total, which is frequently what you need, what you're interested in. If you say, oh, but I need the detail for Maine, I can click on the plus next to that, and I'm seeing detail for Maine only. And once I want to close it up, I can go back there and say, here's the minus. And so I can either plus it to open it or minus it. If I say I want to see number 1, that's just going to be the grand total, so that's usually not very useful, but this one is. And if I wanted to print it out that way, for instance, I could go to, aside from the fact that I'd probably have to make it landscape in order to see them both on one page. No, even then it doesn't show. Okay, so I need to play around a little with the margins or hide some of the columns, but you get the idea. You can print it the way you see it. And of course, number 3 would bring everything back again. Now, once you've done your subtotals because you needed to provide that information for somebody, that's fine, but do not continue using this as a regular database with sorting and filtering and adding records and deleting records in this format. You need to turn this off. So in order to turn it off, you go to Subtotal, and you say Remove. And then you're right back, we're right back where we started. So we have no subtotals, we have no totals, we just have all our data. It happens to be in the same sort order that we put it in. Now, if you would, to do one more example of this, let's say we wanted to sort it, subtotal it by department. So the first thing I would have to do is click into department and then say, okay, sort it by department. So I have all the people in the development department and then in the research department, et cetera. I don't remember how many departments, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 departments. Okay, now I'm going to go to subtotal. And of course, instead of each change in location, we're going to say each change in department, because that's where we want it to create a subtotal. Again, it's going to replace prior ones. I don't need page breaks, and give me a summary. Okay. And so here we have the development department, the research, the sales, the staff, and the grand total. And if I wanted to do it by more than one, I'm going to go back into the subtotal for one more. Maybe I wanted to also go to the hours, and maybe I wanted to see, yeah, some of the hours. I'll say okay. And now it's giving me the hours in addition to the gross pay for each one and for total. Okay. And again, since if I want to use this as a regular database in the future, I need to turn off the subtotals. So I will just say remove all. And we're back to square one. That's a feature that does not work when you have created a table. So you might have to send it back to a regular data set. So I had shown you how to do that before. Okay. Let's say we wanted to use certain data functions. Like you have sum and average and max and min, you also have DSum, DAvg, Dmax, and those are database functions. And the concept for the database functions is I don't want to be modifying what this looks like by sorting, filtering, and changing and so forth. I simply want to be pulling out certain sums and averages, let's say, in a separate area without changing what my database looks like. I need to keep it in this order and so forth. So for that to work, we need to create what's called a criteria range. And the way to do that is to select all of your headings, do a copy, and I'm just using a Control-C, and then you can do this underneath or next to or whatever, and then do a paste. So I have a copy of my headings. In order to illustrate this, I'm going to put something in here in the location. Let's say I put Vermont, so it's the state. Just using that as an example. Now, in order for the program to know that this is your criteria range, I'm going to select those copied headings with the extra row that I'm going to use to put my criteria in, and I'm going to name that up here in the name box, and I'm going to use the name crit1 for criteria 1. You can name this anything you want, and you can name it octopus if you want. It doesn't matter, just as long as it's easy to remember for you. Okay, to make this a feature easy to do, instead of having to reselect the database all the time, I'm going to click in the database, use a Control-A, which selects automatically all the contiguous data. Again, important to have everything contiguous. And I'm going to name that data. And again, you can name it anything you want, but that seems to work. And I want to make a note that the field that we are going to want to be summing up based on different criteria is going to be the gross pay field. And the gross pay field is in K4. I can give that a range name, or I can select it when I'm doing my data sum function, or I can just say K4. So whatever you like. I'm just going to type in K4 when I need it. Easy enough. And here's where I'm going to create, let's say, a label to say here's the sum and here's the average. Oops. Somehow that didn't work. Okay. Okay, and here's where I'm going to put my function or my formula. And once you've set it up with the criteria range, et cetera, the formula is extremely simple. So the formula is equal DSum. As soon as I start typing it, it narrows it down to the few functions that start with a ds, so I'm going to say DSum. And here's the information you need. In order to make it a little clearer, I'm going to open up the insert function box. So we have a whole box. And remember, I named the database data. The field was K4. That's the gross pay field. I could have just clicked on it as well. And the criteria is my criteria range, which is crit1. Once I say, oh, you can even see the answer here, but once I say OK, you'll see the answer. And I'm just going to put this in a format that makes it a little easier to see, a comma format. OK, so it's 15,847. And if I want to check that, because right now it's looking at my criteria range and saying, give me the Vermont information, I'd have to sort it by Vermont in order to check this easily, and then select all of the Vermont gross pay. And then down here, I can see the sum is 15,879, same as here. So that's just my check. Now, the power of this is that instead of Vermont, or in addition to Vermont, if I only want the Vermont that is on the staff, I can add another criteria to my criteria range, and it changes, because now it's only looking at Vermont staff. If I wanted to look at Maine staff, now it changes again because it's only looking at Maine. If I wanted to look at Maine sales, I can do that. So anything I put in this criteria row here is saying, give me an AND query. I'm doing an AND query. So I'm saying anyone who is in Maine, located in Maine, and in the sales department. Or I could say, and has a benefit that includes a D. Because some of the benefits, maybe it's disability, some of the benefits include a D and some don't. So I'm using a wildcard to say anything with a D. So I can fill in any of those that I like. Now, what if I said I wanted Maine or sales? Whoops, moved it a little too far. I'm going to move it one row below. Okay, so right now it's ignoring that because crit1 doesn't include that row. So what I would need to do if I want to do an OR query is create a criteria range that includes that. And so I've selected that, and I'm going to say crit2. And now you see why I named the first one criteria 1. So now I'd have to change my my definition here from crit1 to crit2, and now it's going to change. So now it's saying anyone who's in Maine, located in Maine, with a benefit that includes a D, or anyone in sales. So if I change this from sales to staff, it's saying or anyone in staff. So you can see how the number changes. If I wanted to do a DAvg, give me the average gross pay of those who meet my criteria, I could say, okay. Sorry, I hit the wrong thing. Equal average. No, equal DAvg I want. Okay, let's try that again. Equal DAvg. Here we go. And again, if I open up the dialog box and fill in data, and fill in K4 for the gross pay field, and fill in crit. Now I could make it crit1 or crit2, but I'm going to say crit2 here because I'm going to include or staff. And here is the average gross pay for the people in Maine with a benefit of D or anybody in the staff department. So once you've set up your criteria ranges, you could select, you could just change what's in the criteria, and you get your immediate answers that you need. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be modifying. You don't have to modify anything in your table. So that might be an advantage. Sometimes you don't want to put this stuff next to, because if you start filtering your data, you might lose it. You want to put it underneath, or you could put it on a different sheet. Okay, so that's the deal. And just to see how many different database sum functions, DCount, DCount-A, DAvg, of course, Dmax, Dmin, of course, DSum, standard deviation, product, So there's all kinds of different functions that are what we call database functions for that reason. Okay, we've gone over our half hour here, but I want to ask if there's any particular question you have. Type it in the chat room if you have a question. We have the sound off because otherwise we'd hear people talking over each other. Okay, I don't see any questions. Well, my name again is Ronnie Kaplan from Computer Training Solutions, and I do training with individuals and with corporations for groups, and you can reach me at 203-329-2421 or on computertrainingsolutions.biz website. Thanks for listening.
And hey, everybody, catch us next month for Excel financial functions, and that's at uscomputer.com. And click the blue event button. Thanks for participating today.